Hi everyone, I'm Sarah of Rich Textures Crochet and welcome to Learn to Crochet with RTC. Getting started, session 1, how to read a written crochet pattern. I'm so glad that you have decided to join me here and that you're interested in learning how to crochet. I can tell you that when I first learned how to crochet, one of the things that I was determined to learn first was how to read a crochet pattern. I had this idea that if I only knew how to read a crochet pattern, I could crochet anything that I wanted to. There are so many different designers out there. All of them are fabulous with a variety of different designs, different techniques, and I wanted to be able to participate with them and make some of these gorgeous designs that I had seen around. So I set out to learn how to read a crochet pattern, and it was one of the very first things that I learned. So there's a lot of value in learning how to read a written crochet pattern. So today we're going to take a look at some of the components and the things that make up a written crochet pattern. We are going to be using one of my own crochet patterns that I designed. It's just a very simple one that I designed in particular for this course. So come on over to my desk and we will get started and we will look at how to read a written crochet pattern. Hi everyone, welcome back. So as I mentioned in this tutorial, we are going to look at how to read a written crochet pattern. And I am going to essentially break down for you the different parts that and sections that you will find in a crochet pattern. Now some of these parts of the pattern are, actually all of them, will be explained later on in further tutorials, and they will be talked about a little bit more in depth in these tutorials. So today we're just going to give a sort of a brief explanation of what each section is and go over some of the things that you will see and that you will find in a crochet pattern. Below, if you take a look at my blog, you are going to find also a written version of this tutorial. You can find it for free at www.richtexturescrochet.com, and there you will also find a free printable for this tutorial, so that if you wanted to print it off, take it with you, take a look at it later, you are welcome to do that as well. So it's all there up for you on this blog. So here we go. First of all, I recommend when you first pick up a crochet pattern, especially if it's one that you're not familiar with, I recommend that you take a quick read through the crochet pattern. You're going to want to make note of anything that might be confusing, anything that you may not understand that you want to kind of come back to. You're going to want to take a look at some of the stitches and that are involved, the pictures, the final product, and that all of these things can kind of give you a beginning step or a foundation for the pattern that you're going to soon tackle. Now, to break down this crochet pattern into the different sections that you're going to find, the first thing that you're going to see on your pattern is your title and your designer's name. You will also there see a picture, and this is the picture of the finished product. You might see close-ups of some of the stitches or some of the techniques that the designer employed, but this is just sort of to give you an idea of what you are going to be making, the final end result and end goal of the pattern. After you see your title and your author and maybe a couple pictures, you're going to find a couple of symbols. Now these symbols are standard across most crochet patterns, and some of them you will actually also find on yarn labels. These symbols were developed and sort of standardized by the Yarn Craft Council, and their goal was to kind of create a continuity between crochet patterns. These symbols are very, very helpful and they give you some useful information, especially when you were first starting out. I'll pick this up for you so you can see it a little bit easier. This first symbol here is the skill level symbol. So if you are just starting out as a someone who is crocheting, you're going to want to look for a symbol that represents a beginner pattern, such as this one. So it will have just one space filled in. There are sort of 4 categories of experience. There's your beginner category, then there is your easy category. So again, if you're just starting out, an easy pattern, the first 2 dots will be filled in. That might be one you want to look at as well. Then you have your intermediate, and then you have your complex. And these patterns with these symbols are rated upon the types of stitches that they employ, maybe some technique that is involved, and those sort of things. So if you are just beginning, you're going to want to look for a crochet pattern that says beginner or easy. These are good patterns that you'll want to start out with. The next symbol that you see here is the yarn weight symbol. This symbol will also correspond with the label on the ball of yarn that you're going to use. And this just made an easy way for someone to determine what weight of yarn they're going to need for a particular project. Yarn is categorized into several weights, starting with a lace weight, which would be a 0. It would be something thin, such as this. And then it goes all the way up to weight 7, which is a jumbo. And I have a couple of examples here. I'm just going to move the pattern over out of the way so you can kind of see the different weights. So this right here is a crochet cotton thread, and it actually has its own category of weight numbers in that. This is considered a size 30 crochet thread. Then if I get into my yarn categories, this is our number 4. So this is the yarn that the pattern calls for. That is a number 4 weight. And then to give you an idea of what a yarn weight of 6 might look like, that is it right there. That's your yarn weight of 6. I'm going to zoom you in here just a little bit. There we go. So here I have a thread that's a size 30. This is your yarn weight of 4, and this is your yarn weight of 6. Now, one of the ways this information is helpful, if you're looking at a crochet pattern and say it's calling for a particular yarn, but you would like to use a different yarn, you might not have it, you might not be able to buy it in stores, you can take a look at this symbol and then go to the yarn store, and in more cases than not, you can probably pick up a yarn with that number 4 and work the same pattern in it and come up with similar results. Now there are other things that sort of factor into your finished product and the size and that, but that's a good place to start when you're looking for a particular yarn. The next thing you have on your crochet pattern is the gauge, and the gauge, simply put, is the number of stitches per inch and the number of rows per inch, and that's made with a specific yarn and a specific hook. Now, why this is important is because everyone crochets with a different tension. So some people may crochet quite tight, and other people might crochet quite loose. So if the pattern requires that your stitches be a certain size, then before you begin, you may want to do what's called a swatch. And a swatch is just a small square worked up in the particular pattern or stitch that they are calling for. And that will help you determine whether or not when you finish your project it will be the same size and to the same dimensions. If you're crocheting a little bit tighter, it might not be, or if a little bit looser, it might be a little bit larger. But there are things that you can do, and we will talk about it in later tutorials. There are things that you can do in order to make sure that your gauge is similar to what's being called for in the pattern. Then you will find somewhere on your pattern the finished size. This gives you an idea of how big or how small the finished product is going to be. Then you will see your yarn. When you walk into the yarn store, there are so many different kinds and colors and sizes and textures of yarn. So this yarn will be listed on your pattern, will be the yarn that particular designer recommends to complete the project, and it's the yarn that they will have used. Again, when we talk about yarn, I'll talk about yarn substitutions and how you can find a different yarn that might fit for your own style and for your project. So the yarn section will give you the name of the yarn that they use, the brand, and the name. It will also give you information such as how big that ball of yarn is, what the yarn is made up of. And it will also somewhere on there, such as right here, tell you how much of that yarn you're going to need. So for this ball of yarn, this is the Bernat Handicrafter Cotton Stripes. That's what was used to make this dishcloth. The yarn ball comes in about 68 yards. But for this project, you're only going to need about 34 yards. So if you do the math, that means you'll be able to make 2 washcloths from each ball of yarn, and you don't necessarily need the entire ball. So it just gives you an idea of how much of the yarn and the type of yarn you're going to need for the particular project. Next, you're going to see the hook. And the size of the hook that you're going to need. Again, we're going to talk about this at a later time, all about crochet hooks, because crochet hooks come in a variety of shapes. They come in a variety of materials and sizes, and it's easy to get overwhelmed not knowing which one to pick for you. But the crochet pattern is a good place to start if you're looking for a particular one. Finally, the pattern will also include notions or further materials that you might need in order to complete the pattern. So things like buttons or ribbon if you need, or safety eyes, things that you might need. Also, this pattern calls for a yarn needle. There it is, which I had. A yarn needle, and that's going to help you finish off your project. Or sometimes it will call for stitch markers. Now this pattern that I'm working with here is a very simple pattern, but occasionally you will need to mark a stitch because perhaps you'll need to come back to that stitch later, or you might need to do something fancy, or it might mark the beginning of a round. Whatever it may be, you might need these little things called stitch markers. So those are further materials, examples of them that you might need for your pattern. And then continuing on in your pattern, you'll come to a section which is written in what looks to be possibly another language. You'll see all of a list somewhere in your pattern of the stitches and abbreviations that are used. Now in crochet, there are a ton. I've never ever tried to count them, but there are so many different stitches and different techniques that you can learn and use in your projects. In each pattern, it will have a list of the specific stitches and abbreviations that you will see in your pattern. It's a good idea, especially when you're first starting out, to familiarize yourself with these. Sometimes if it's a complex stitch, the designer may include a little bit of an instruction on how to do that stitch. But it's a good idea to kind of familiarize yourself with this. In some ways, it's like learning another language. Just some people, it will seem just a jumble of letters, and it might not make sense at all. But trust me, as you get to know these abbreviations and as you work with them more and more, it will become like second nature, and you won't even think about trying to remember what an SK was or a SC was. It'll just come second nature. Now, as well in this pattern, I have also included some pattern notes. Now, these are very handy if the designer has included some pattern notes in their design. Very, very important, very handy to take a look at these. These are going to give you an idea of one, what language. There's sort of two different sets of abbreviations floating out there. There's the American English ones, and then there's also some UK terms. And so it's very helpful to know which terms the pattern is written in. And I'll talk about more about that at another time. It'll tell you whether the pattern is worked in rows, or if it's worked in a circular fashion or round. It will tell you if at the beginning of your row, if there's a chain stitch, if it counts as a stitch or not. And then it may tell you to weave in your ends. Any information that the designer thinks is important for you to know before you begin your pattern, it will be found written in these pattern notes. Okay. Then continuing on, after all of that, it's a lot to take in. I had a professor once who used to say, just let everything wash over you. And that's what I'm going to recommend that you do here. Just let all of this wash over you. And as you come back and you begin actually working with a pattern in a little bit, then I'm sure all of this information will kind of come flooding back to you, and I'll finally click and say, that makes sense. It is a lot to take in. So after all of that, we finally come to our crochet pattern, and you can see, if it's the first time looking at a crochet pattern, you have all of these symbols here, you have numbers floating around. When we come back together and actually start working on this pattern, again, a lot of this will begin to make sense. Now, something that has been taught to me when you are first starting out learning how to read a crochet pattern, if you are finding that you are getting confused or overwhelmed with all of these abbreviations, don't be afraid to take your pattern and write it out in full form. So here, for instance, it says CH27. Well, if you go back to your stitches and abbreviations, you will see that CH stands for chain. So you're going to chain 27 and write that down. Row 1, SC in the third chain from hook. Well, what does that mean? You can write it out. SC is a single crochet in the third chain from your hook. And that will help you kind of keep your feet on the ground, keep your head level, and it's just one less thing that you have to worry about when it's all written out. You don't have to worry about memorizing these abbreviations. And again, as you work with patterns, it will become second nature to you. So a pattern is always worked in the order that it is given. Sometimes you may see little symbols, such as this little star right there, and that is a repeat symbol. So when you see a little repeat, that's just a note for you to make a mental note that eventually in the pattern, such as right here, it says to repeat from. You're going to have to come back to that spot and repeat that section however many times the designer asks you to repeat. You'll also see after you've finished that row, the row 1, you'll see at the end there's some brackets, and the brackets may include some stitch counts. So this is helpful when you're working and you come to the end of the row. It tells you how many stitches you should have in your row. So you will know if you have worked the pattern correctly if you go back and count your individual stitches. So this one says you should have 13 single crochets. So you could go back and you can count all of your single crochets in that row to make sure that you have the number that the designer has called for. If you don't, then you have a good indication that there might be a mistake somewhere, and you can correct it early on rather than finding it after you've completed half of your project. It happens though. Mistakes get made. Don't be afraid of having to tear things out if you need to, or don't be afraid of kind of making it up, or just kind of moving past the mistake and leaving the mistake there. It is your piece of art, and you're able to do and complete it however you would like. Then finally, after you complete the crochet pattern, this pattern has 22 rows. After you complete your 22 rows, it will ask you to fasten off and probably to weave in your ends. And again, at a later tutorial, I will go over with you how to do that. Finally, on your crochet pattern, somewhere there you will see your copyright information. Now, a crochet pattern in its written or video tutorial form is copyrighted by the designer, and this means that while you may, in most cases, sell your finished product that you made, you are not allowed to give away or sell copies of the written pattern. The written pattern belongs to the crochet designer, and that's even if you've paid for it. You are not allowed to distribute it in any form, and that is what that copyright information signifies. You may also see on there, you can visit them on Facebook, you can find them on the internet, on their blog, or whatever forms of social media they may have. So that is a crochet pattern in a nutshell. Again, it was probably a lot of information to take in, but don't worry. Over the coming days, or however quickly you work through these video tutorials, we will begin to make sense in a practical way each of the components of the crochet patterns. So thank you very much for joining me for this tutorial on how to read a written crochet pattern. And now that everything is clear as mud, I will say see you later. Happy crocheting, and I hope that you will join me for my next tutorial. Again, you may find these on my blog in written form at www.richtexturescrochet.com, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you very much. I'll see you soon. Happy crocheting.